Okay, here we go. Right, we have, ladies, do not get too upset by this, but we have only 2.5 weeks to Pesach. Three weeks actually.
3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks. Oh, now we've got feedback.
It's prepared.
Let me switch these off.
I'm doing it.
Oh, right. Switch off, Hannah, please. There we go. Right, we've got
Mute
3 weeks to
everybody.
Pesach.
Mute everybody.
So we have 2 Mondays left before Pesach. That's correct, is it not?
Without
Two
this
more.
one.
Yeah. So we're going to look at the Haggadah a little bit. So I thought I would start tonight with perhaps my favorite part of the Haggadah. Who is going to guess which is my favorite part of the Haggadah?
Oh, Lachmanu.
The meal. Frank says the meal. Quite
Oh,
right.
Lachmanu.
The four questions.
Haggaddah.
None of those things. Huh?
The four,
Hello.
not the four
Not
questions.
Avodim Hayinu either.
Hello.
Oscar.
Hello.
No, I'm going to tell you because by the time you guess, we'll be over. The Shiur will be over. It's the 5 rabbis in Bnei Brak.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Okay. So we're going to look at the 5 rabbis in Bnei Brak, and we're going to look at it together, and we're going to see what we can learn that we didn't already know. Let's find the place first of all
Haggaddah.
in the Haggadah.
Johnny,
Yes.
you're going to sing the song from the children's Haggadah.
Am I going to sing the song?
Yeah, of Rabbi.
I am certainly not going to sing the song, and nor am I going to get Philip to sing the song either. Just in case you were thinking that I might.
so you're talking about right after the 10 Eser Hamakot.
No, I'm talking
After the
much
Eser
early-
Hamakot is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, no?
No, I'm talking earlier on.
Earlier?
The 5 rabbis who were sitting in Bnei Brak.
Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer.
Maaseh, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Elazar. It's immediately after
I
Avadim
see.
Hayinu.
Yeah.
Immediately after Avadim Hayinu.
I
So
got it.
You got it? Everybody got it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So let's just, before we do anything else, let's just place the
Time.
not the time for the moment. Place it in place, in space. Where is it in the Haggadah? In the Leila Seder. So we come in. This is according to the regular Seder of the Seder. Some of you may know I do the Seder upside down in a completely different way to most people. But that's not for now. That's for another day. But in the regular order of things, we come in, we make kiddush, we do yacha, we do yachatz, we do karpas, we wash our hands, we do karpats, we break the matzah, hide the bit for afikoman, and we say halachma anya, this is the bread of affliction. And then we have the manishtana, the 4 questions that the youngster asks. And then we give the answer, Avadim Hayinu, we were slaves to Paro and Mitzrayim. Shem took us out. Very nice. Let's just read that answer to the 4 questions very quickly. I'll read it in English straight away so we don't waste time with it because that's not our subject tonight. Our ancestors were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but God brought us out from there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. If the Kodesh Baruch Hu had not brought our ancestors out of Egypt, we and our children and our children's children would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. So even if we were all wise and clever and old and learned in the Torah, it would still be our duty to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. The more one talks about the Exodus, the more praiseworthy it is. Okay? Now that is basically the answer to the Manishtana. And then you could argue that it's all over. That's it. You've done your job. And you shall tell your children on that day, what day? Leila Seder. What are you meant to tell them? Tell them about Yetziat Mitzrayim. So we've done it. We've fulfilled the mitzvah. And the truth is that if that was all that you had time to do, for whatever reason, maybe you had to go into the mamad or chas v'chalil or something worse, then that is actually the nub of the mitzvah. is v'higadat alavincha b'yom hahu. That's it. That's the sort of, if you like, the
Crux.
the 2020 version of the Haggadah. Right. So then, having done that, and having said that even if we were all kulanu chachamim, we were all wise men, kulanu nevonim, we were all understanding, kulanu zekenim, we were all elders, kulanu yodim et Torah, we all knew the Torah, we'd still have to do this. And then we go into our parsha that we want to talk about here. We take a breath and we say, you know what? It happened once that there were these people who were chachamim. They were wise people. They were nevonim. They were understanding. They were zekenim. They were the elders of the community, and they all knew the Torah. And what did they do? They sat all night in Bnei Brak discussing Yetziat Mitzrayim. Let's basically read the language, and then we'll discuss it in more detail. Maaseh b'Rabbi Eliezer, b'Rabbi Yeshua, b'Rabbi Elazar, ben Azariah, b'Rabbi Akiva, b'Rabbi Tarfon. These 5 rabbis, Maaseh. What's a Maaseh?
Subin. A story.
A story.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Yiddish, we'd call it a
Maisa.
Maisa. It's the same word, right? We might call it, if Philip was saying it, we might say it was a Bubba Maisa. Right? Maisa, right? Maaseh. Maaseh. There was a story. There's a story happened with these 5 rabbis. Shahayu Mesubin.
Sitting, reclining.
They were reclining. Where have you heard that word before?
In the Manishtana.
Manishtana. We just said it 5 minutes ago. If we were in the Seder,
Yeah.
right? What's the last one? Shebechol haleilot anu ochlin ben yoshvin ben mesubin. Every other night of the year, we can eat either sitting or mesubin, reclining. So these guys, these rabbis, shahayu mesubin, they were reclining. So they're telling us, this parish is telling us straight away that they were fulfilling the mitzvah of Leil HaSeder. They're doing this in a reclining situation.
Where does this say that on Pesach?
Sorry?
Where does this say this happens on Pesach?
Where does it say this happened on Pesach? That's a very good question, Lionel. I'd never thought of that. I think it doesn't say Dafka that it was on Pesach. However, the fact that they were mesubin, the fact that they were lying around, right? They were lying, they were leaning. Bnei Brak, we'll come back to Bnei Brak in a minute. You might have
called it pondering around.
And they were talking, what were they doing? Vahayu misaprim. What's that? What's the word?
They were telling.
From the word sefer,
Yeah.
book, right? They were telling a story. Misaprim, they were telling the story, B'Yetziat Mitzrayim, of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Here it is, Lionel. Kol oto halayla, all that night. So I think it's clear. I mean, it's not explicit, but it's fairly implicit that we're talking about Seder night.
In my Haggaddah, it says on the night of
Okay.
Passover.
Sorry, what? Who said what then, Jackie?
On my Haggaddah, it says straight on the night of Passover.
Okay, on the night of Passover. I think that is what most people would say. But I'm interested in hearing what Lionel says, because Lionel has just said he's got something that says it was not on Pesach.
Nobody now, brother.
Oh, he can't find it now. He's backtracking.
He didn't
now.
say that.
He's
He
doing
said
a
it
Keir
was-
Starmer. He's doing a U-turn. All right. Okay, Lionel, you've got till next
He
Monday
said,
to
was
find
it
it.
on
Okay.
Pesach?
Okay. So, all right.
Johnny, I think the fact that it's in the Haggadah. because
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for the
they
moment,
hand
let's
it down
accept.
to generation.
Let's accept that it was on Leila Seder. It was on Seder night. They are leaning, and they're talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim. You know, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So if they're leaning and they're talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim and they're doing it all night, it's probably Seder night. Okay.
Where were their families then? Why didn't they just...
Well, where were their families? Okay, that's a good
That's the
question.
point, yeah,
All right,
that's the point line.
we'll come back to that.
There's another question. Why weren't they in Israel?
Okay, very good question. You never thought of all these things before, did you? And that's the beauty of doing this very slowly. Frank has just said, where were their families? And Lionel has just said, why weren't they in Yerushalayim? Okay, we're going to answer all of these questions.
Also, they weren't eating, Johnny, either. So we only eat kulan and masubin.
Well, they must have been eating at some point if it was Leila Seder, because that's a mitzvah, is to eat the matzah and to eat the maror. To eat the afikoman and to have a shulchan aruch. So they must have been eating at some point. Okay, so we're going to answer all of these questions. Let's see how we get on. So let's just finish off reading it. Hayum esaprim b'tziat Mitzrayim. They were talking about and discussing and telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, like as if they didn't already know the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Okay, these 5 rabbis are the Gedolei Hador. These are the 5 greatest rabbis of the generation. We're going to look exactly who they were in a moment. Kol oto alayla, all that night, ad shaba'u talmidehem, until their students came, va'amru lahem,
then it's time.
And they said to them,
it's time to Daven.
I can't hear whoever was speaking then. I can't hear what you're saying.
I said it's time to Daven. That's what they told them.
Don't jump the gun, Faye.
Where's Faye?
Okay, until the students came, va'amru lahem, and they said to them, Rabotenu, our rabbis, Higia zman kriyat shema shel shacharit. The time has come to say the kriyat shema of shacharit. Okay, that's the story. That's the story. Okay, and that's the parasha I want to discuss tonight. So let's now talk about it in some detail. First of all, when did this take place? Well, we've got some kind of clue, because we know when at least some of these rabbis lived. For example, who's the most famous of those? I suppose is Rabbi Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva.
We know when Rabbi Akiva lived. When did Rabbi Akiva live?
Time of Bar Kokhba.
Time of the Romans.
Okay, we can certainly use the Bar Kokhba rebellion as a pivot point, because we know that Rabbi Akiva was a supporter of Bar Kokhba. Rabbi Akiva actually thought Bar Kokhba was the Mashiach. And what year was the Bar Kokhba rebellion? Not you, David. You're not allowed to answer this question. You're a historian, so you're not allowed. Okay, I've got David Altman with me here, everyone. So I'm forbidding him from answering the question. Anybody else want to tell me what year was the Bar Kokhba uprising?
75?
No, 70 was the year. 70 is a very important year. You remember the number correctly. 70 was the year that the
Second Temple
was destroyed.
135.
135. Who said that?
Jeff.
Jeff said 135. Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. 132 to 135. Correct. 135 was the end of it. 132 was the beginning. So Rabbi Akiva was going strong in 132, at least. We know that from the Bar Kokhba. We also know that he was alive at the time of the Churban. Okay, so we know that Rabbi Akiva lived in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. So that is when our story takes place. Now, this story takes place between those two dates. Between 70 CE, which was the time when the temple was destroyed, and 132, when the Bar Kokhba uprising began. How do I know that? Well, we'll see as we go along that it becomes obvious that was when it took place. Now, if you think about the historical context here, 70 CE was the destruction of the temple. The Jewish people are on their tochus, right? They are rock bottom. The Romans have come, they have destroyed the temple, they have exiled many of the Jews. Those who are left are subject to very harsh Roman rule, including forbidding what?
Learning
Reading
Torah.
of the Torah.
The learning of the Torah.
Which explains why it wasn't in Yerushalayim.
Which explains why it wasn't in Yerushalayim. Because Yerushalayim had been razed to the ground.
Rabbi
Okay.
Lieberman, are you
Yes.
aware of a book that Yochai Brandeis wrote in Hebrew about this period of time? She made it a historic novel, a love story about Rabbi Akiva, and she, I forgot the book. I read it a long time ago, but she wrote this story that these rabbis were
Fascinating. No,
together.
I'm not aware of that book. I'd like you to remember the title at some point and let me know.
The author is Yochai Brandeis. So
Okay,
if you
we
look-
should be able to find it from that.
Yeah.
I'll set my researchers on it. If I have to read it in Hebrew, though, it'll take me too long.
Maybe it's been translated. I don't know.
It's been translated. Okay, well, we can read it in
Maybe,
English a lot
maybe.
quicker.
I read
Right.
it in Hebrew.
So this is the time we're talking about. We're talking about the time after the destruction of the temple, before the uprising of Bar Kokhba. So sometime in those 60 years, which, as Frank said, explains why they weren't in Yerushalayim. Now, that was the next question. We now know when it took place. It took place within those 60 years under Roman rule, very harsh Roman rule, where the teaching of Torah was forbidden. Now, it was in Bnei Brak. What was particular about Bnei Brak at that time?
No Haredim.
No Haredim. Well, probably not. No.
Why? Everybody was high.
Wait a minute. I
let's
think
not get in. Let's not go
five
there.
rabbis
Let's
must have
not
been
go
Haredim.
there. Let's not go there. Philip,
If
shut
they
up.
weren't
Right.
Haredi, they weren't.
Okay. What was particular about Bnei Brak at
It was
that
a
time?
territory from the tribe of Dan.
What?
It was from the tribe of Dan.
Who was from the tribe of
tribe.
Dan?
Bnei Brak.
Bnei Brak was in the tribe of Dan? No, Bnei Brak would have been in Gush Dan, maybe.
In the territory.
Maybe, yeah, but okay. Let me ask the question differently. Whose patch was it?
Palestine.
Yeah, it was in Palestine.
The Pharisees.
It was it's not fair. I'm not asking you the question correctly. I'll tell you. This was Rabbi Akiva's patch. Bnei Brak was Rabbi Akiva's stronghold. That was Rabbi Akiva's base. Okay, that's where all his students were. That's where his yeshiva, as it were, presumably at this time, it would have been an underground yeshiva. Bear in mind that I've just said underground yeshiva. So this was in Rabbi Akiva's territory. So we've now got the historical context. It's post-Churban, before the uprising. The Jewish people are subjugated by the Romans. They're not allowed to be doing what they're doing here, discussing Torah. And they're on Rabbi Akiva's patch.
So when,
Okay?
so when does Give Me Yavne fit in on this?
Okay. Yavne, it was at this period. That's where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai went. Yeah, quite right. Tenli Yavne v'chachameha. You're quite right. Yavne was the center of learning, but Bnei Brak was Rabbi Akiva's patch. Remember, Rabbi Akiva was not just one of the Chachamim. He was a political figure as well. Remember, he was a big supporter of Bar Kokhba.
Yeah.
And there is one opinion, it's an opinion with which I concur for what it's worth. Who cares what I think? But it's one that sits well with me, and that is that the 24,000 pupils of Rabbi Akiva, who allegedly perished between Pesach and Shavuot, were actually soldiers in the army of Bar Kokhba, and that they died fighting for Bar Kokhba. That is an opinion which sits well with me because
24,000,
because
that's a lot.
if as we know Rabbi Akiva was a big supporter of Bar Kokhba, for sure he would have got his students out of the yeshiva and into the army. And he would have been getting them to support Bar Kokhba. And so I believe that it's likely that was the case. So Rabbi Akiva was not just a chacham, he was also a political leader. And Bnei Brak was his patch. Okay, so now let's have a look now. So we know where it was. It was in Rabbi Akiva's stronghold in Bnei Brak in that time period. Let's have a look at who these 5 rabbis were. The first one, Rabbi Eliezer. Now, which Rabbi Eliezer are we talking about? Because there are a few.
Hyrcanus?
Ben Hyrcanus, yes, very good, Philip.
The son of Hor.
How did you know that?
Guest.
Guessed. Okay, it was a good guess. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Now, if you have a look in Bava Metzia, if you want to look later on in Bava Metzia, page 59b, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is known as, and this is no less than Rabbi Akiva who says this, that Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is one of the greatest halachic minds of the time.
Just a small question. Were these 5 rabbis amongst the Asara Haragei Malchut?
Some of them, not all of them, not all of them, some of them. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is known as a giant of halacha, and he was so steadfast in his belief that his halacha was right that eventually he was put in cherem. He was excommunicated.
Wow.
Right? Why do you think that he was eventually excommunicated?
Because he was too extreme, too fanatic.
I'm not quite sure he would say too extreme or too fanatic, but he was too...
He was pushing too many buttons.
Yes, Hannah is right. He was too steadfast in his own opinion. Hannah is right. There is a story. I'm going to ask you, Hannah, what the story was in a sec. There was a story, which is a very famous story, which very many of you know, and I know that you know it because we once went on a tiul together, some of you, and we went to a place where we were shown a movie about this Gemara. This Gemara tells us there was a story in the Gemara where Rabbi Eliezer was absolutely adamant that his opinion was correct, and he even invoked miracles to prove that he was correct, and eventually he was chucked out and excommunicated because he refused to bow to the majority opinion.
What do you mean by excommunicate? You can put a guy at cherem, but you can't push him out of the religion.
Excommunicate. That's what cherem is. Cherem is excommunication. Okay, so what was the story? Anybody know?
I don't know what the issue was, but he called on various, as you say, miracles.
Yeah. So what was the story? Anyone know? Okay, well, allow David to answer the question since nobody else knows the answer. David, you're allowed to answer the question. The tanor shel achnai was the oven, a special oven of achnai, and there was a whole machlokas there about whether it was tamei or whether it was tahor, whether it was pure or not pure. It doesn't matter what the story was, what the halacha was. Rabbi Eliezer says one way, and all the other chachamim said, no, it's not, it's the other way. And Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm right, then this carob tree should be uprooted. And what happens? It's uprooted. And they say, we're not interested in miracles. And he says, well, if I'm right, this river should flow backwards. And it did. And then he said, well, if I'm right, the walls of the Beis HaMedrash should fall in. And the walls started to fall in. And then a bat kol came from Shamayim and said, Rabbi Eliezer is right, that is the halacha, but he's wrong because we don't go what goes on in Shamayim's not interested. What we're interested in is what the majority of the rabbis say. And so that's the story of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, most famous story. He was a very steadfast halachist. Okay, that was him, number one. Number two, Rabbi Yoshua. Which Rabbi Yoshua was it?
In
Philip,
Nun.
have a guess. Which Rabbi
No.
Yeshua?
No.
Yeshua ben Nun.
Not
No.
Rabbi
No.
Yeshua ben Nun, no.
No.
The same time period.
Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania.
Hanania.
Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania. And he is presented in the Gemara completely opposite to Rabbi Eliezer. He is a real pragmatist. He always goes with the majority. And again, if you want to look it up, in Brachot 10b, there's a story there where Rabbi Yeshua interprets a halachic question in a very positive, hopeful, resilient sort of way. And he was the sort of the voice of hope amongst the rabbis. So you've got a halachist, a real firebrand, Rabbi Eliezer. You've got a pragmatist, Rabbi Yeshua, and then you've got Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. Now you'll know him. You'll know him from our Pirkei Avot Shiur. Those of you who've been coming on a Shabbat afternoon. Who is Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah? What was special about him?
He was a Nasi.
He was a Nasi, but only for a short period of time.
Because he got kicked out too.
No, he didn't get kicked out.
No?
He was a descendant of Ezra, correct? He had big yichus, and he was a young man. How old was he?
18. 18.
18. And how old did he look?
70.
70, because we know that.
Yeah.
Because look at the next story in your Haggadah.
He must have been.
Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Harei ani kaven shivim shana. I am like a man of 70 years old. You all know this famous story. He was actually only 18. Now, what happened here was Rabbi Gamliel, who was the Nasi, had been very, very nasty to one of the other rabbis, Rabbi Yoshua, if I'm not mistaken. And he had made him come on the day that Rabbi Yeshua thought was Yom Kippur, had made him come with his stick and his purse and had really shamed Rabbi Yeshua. And the rabbis got together and said, we can't have this. And they basically deposed Rabban Gamliel from being the Nasi. The politics of it is unbelievable. They deposed the Nasi.
Like what happens today.
There was a coup. And they deposed him. And then he said, oh, now what we're going to do? We need a new Nasi. Well, they said, oh, well, obvious choice is Rabbi Akiva. Well, they couldn't have Rabbi Akiva because he descended from Gerim. So they said, no, he hasn't got somebody else. And they said, no, he can't have him. He's not got enough money because you might be, if you've not got a lot of money, you might be open to a bribe. Anyway, eventually they settled on Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And he did a very, very clever thing. What did he do when they said to him, we'd like to make you the Nasi? What did he do?
He grew his beard longer.
Correct. Lionel got it in one.
What?
He said, I'm going to ask my wife. He's no fool, right? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah went to ask his wife, and what did his wife say, Lionel?
What do I get out of
Yeah,
it?
she says, you must be mad. What do you want that job for? That's a rubbish job. Whatever happens, you're going to be, you're going to be wrong. So she advised him not to do it. And she said, and anyway, you're too young. You haven't got a long beard. And a miracle happened. And he looked overnight.
He was 18 and he was married already?
18 and he was married. Yeah, he was already married to a very, very clever woman. Anyway, overnight, he went grey and had a grey beard. And that's what happens when you become the Nasi. You go grey overnight. And then that's why he looked like he was 70. He was only 18. And that's why the Haggadah says, Harei ani ka ben shivim shana. I'm like a man of 70 years old. Okay, so what do we know about him? He was rich. He had great yichus. And at the age of 18, he was fitting to be the Nasi. So another superstar, right? So far, we've got 3 superstars. Who's next after Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? We've got Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, I don't have to tell you about him. He was certainly a superstar, right? Probably the most towering figure in the whole of the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehuda, and Nasi, probably the 2 greatest Tanaim.
But Johnny, if he was wrong about Mashiach, didn't he get chastised for that?
No, everyone can make mistakes, Jackie. He was ridiculed by some people for it afterwards, but it's very easy afterwards, isn't it? Easy with hindsight. Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva. And the fifth one was Rabbi Tarfon. Now, Rabbi Tarfon was one of the Asara Harugei Malchut. Rabbi Tarfon was one of the 10 martyrs. And he was...
So was Rabbi Akiva.
Yes. He was an absolute zealot. He was a real kanoi, a zealot. He was a firebrand, a real firebrand. And so the reason I've spent some time going through this is that we're not talking about 5 ordinary rabbis here. We are talking about probably in this 60-year period, we're talking about the 5 most prominent rabbis and political leaders, because he was a zealot, and then we've got the pragmatist, and we've got the halachist, and we've got Rabbi Akiva, who we know supported Bar Kokhba. This is not just any old meeting of rabbis on a Seder night. This is basically the war cabinet.
The creme de la creme.
This is the war cabinet that is meeting on Seder night. These are the 5 most prominent rabbis, 5 most prominent leaders, all sitting there together. Now, the backdrop, of course, is the temple was destroyed, and the Torah study was banned under penalty of death. And of course, we know that later on the 10 martyrs were killed because of that. So the question then is, what were they doing all night and where were they? So they were in Bnei Brak, but I've got a question to you.
And they were doing the Seder.
Why did their pupils need to come and tell them that it was time to say Shema? Why couldn't they know that themselves?
Because they were
so immersed in their studies
one at
that
a
they
time.
weren't in this world.
They were underground.
They were underground. They were underground because they weren't able to meet openly above ground, because these were, you know, I mean, where's the in the Kiryah now? Our leaders are in a bunker, right? Where were those Yimach Shemam Iranians when we sorted them out? They were in their war room underground. Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Mossad led us to them, and we managed to sort them out. But they were all underground. Their leaders were all underground. These 5 leaders were underground. And they had the students. Where were the students?
guarding upstairs.
Guarding the entrance upstairs, right? Yeah. And of course, they could see that the sun was coming up, and it was time to daven Shacharis. Okay, that's the simple pshat. The simple pshat. Now, what else could it mean that they came and said, Rabotenu Hazman Igia?
You have to get out of here.
In what they're doing, you lose track of anything else around.
Okay, so Frank says, and this is a well-known pshat, that they were so engrossed in what they were doing, on the face of it, discussing Yetziat Mitzrayim, which is, you know, how we're taught this, forget the politics for the moment. On a simple basis, they were so busy doing the mitzvah of telling Yetziat Mitzrayim that they were out of this world. They didn't even realize what the time was, you know? Doesn't time fly when you're enjoying yourself?
That's exactly what I said.
You lose track of time. Okay, but there's something else, perhaps a little deeper, that perhaps it was that they were doing. Perhaps they weren't just discussing the previous Yetziat Mitzrayim. What is Yetziat Mitzrayim, after all? It is the Geulah, right? The redemption. These were political leaders as well as rabbis. What might they have been discussing here?
How to overthrow the Romans.
How to overthrow the Romans. How best, and of course, remember, I set the historical context. This is before the Bar Kokhba uprising. This is almost, the Bar Kokhba uprising didn't happen overnight. He didn't wake up one morning in 132 and say, I think we'll have an uprising. Of course, there was a groundswell of opinion, right, David? Oh, David's dropped off. Right, David? There was a groundswell of opinion, and it took a number of years before Bar Kokhba had gathered enough troops,
That's what we need in Iran.
enough followers, and without doubt, these rabbis.
Are Garth? Is that what's your name, Garth? You are an angel, so you're bringing. You just brought me.
We'll mute Faye because we don't know what's going on. Right, without doubt, these rabbis were discussing Yetziat Mitzrayim, but also without doubt, what do we discuss around our Seder table? We don't just discuss Yetziat Mitzrayim, do you? For absolute sure, we're going to be discussing current affairs. We're going to be discussing the war. We're going to be, hopefully it'll be over by then. But whatever it is, we're going to be discussing the current affairs. These were the top leaders. This was a war cabinet. They were underground in Bnei Brak, in Rabbi Akiva's bunker, as it were. And they were discussing the upcoming Bar Kokhba revolt. And so this was a very dangerous thing to be doing. Right? The Romans knew who these people were. They knew who the leaders were. No doubt they knew where they were. And what they were doing was very dangerous. The students outside were watching out. And what happens when it's time to say Kriyat Shema?
The first Shema.
What happens outside?
Dawn.
Daylight. And that's dangerous. So this might have been code to say, rabbis, it's light outside. You need to start thinking about dispersing because this is too dangerous for all of you to be together in daylight. So perhaps hidden in this little story here is the politics of what was going on in Rome at that time. So
was also another problem. The Romans wanted to build Ilia Capitolina in the same place where Bet HaMikdash used to be. They wanted to build a temple for
Zeus.
Jupiter.
They didn't. In the end, they didn't. The Muslims built.
So David has pointed out that these leaders would have been discussing a serious problem, and that is that the Romans wanted to build on the site of the Bet Mikdash a temple to Zeus. To their own gods. And this would have been things that they were discussing. This was very subversive stuff that they would have been discussing around their table or around their thing. So what we can see here from this story, if we just sort of peel away the sort of simple pshat that we're used to reading, is that there's much more to it. There's a subtext here. Also, what does the Shema signify? What is the Shema for us?
That we are with God one.
Not the time. What is the concept of Shema?
He's our God.
Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Shem Echad. It is our mission statement that we believe in the one God and nothing else. So, if you like, when the students came along and said it's time to say Shema for the morning, what they were saying is they are reaffirming HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship. It was a strengthening of their position against the Romans and saying, if you like, we will never be moved from our position of Shema, of Hashem Echad. Yes, Frank?
I think what we've just been saying, actually, with the war cabinet discussing contemporary issues all the way forward, actually holds more credence when we think about it, because would the rabbis really have banished their students somewhere else? Surely, if it was a matter of learning and recounting from the past, they'd welcome, any rabbi would welcome the Talmudim to be part of that discussion. Okay,
let me say that for the recording and for the Zoomers. Frank said it makes sense because the Talmudim weren't round the table. They were up there. They were up there guarding, and that also answers the other question that I think you asked earlier on, Frank. Where were the families? What is the mitzvah of Seder night?
Tell your children.
Ve'gadat alavincha, to tell your children. Where were the children? Well, you don't bring your children to the dangerous war cabinet room. They're in a different place. So this was almost certainly a very important subversive war cabinet type situation.
Could they have actually had their family Sidorim first, and this actually was people convening that much later, because there's no mention of the meal, they finished their eating, and this is their
So maybe this is where Lionel came in. Lionel earlier on said, well, maybe it wasn't Pesach. And Frank is not quite as radical as Lionel. Frank is saying, well, maybe they'd finished Seder night with their families, and they've now been summoned, if you like, or Rabbi Akiva has called his cabinet together, his war cabinet, to discuss matters. Now, that's all of that is entirely possible. Yes,
why
Johnny.
Did they say they were discussing Metzias Mitzrayim in the Haggadah?
Okay, it does. Quite right, Johnny. It does say they were discussing Yetziat Mitzrayim. Okay,
is that a code?
I have two comments on that. Number one, I started to say it earlier on, and then I think I got sidetracked. What is Yetziat Mitzrayim, Johnny? Well, basically, it's the
freedom. Our freedom.
It's freedom. Geula. Freedom from what?
Slavery.
Freedom from slavery, and freedom to do what?
To daven to God.
Your religion.
To practice your religion, to be a Jew as you wish. That is what Yetziat Mitzrayim is about. It's about being a people. It's about being a free people. How many times throughout Leila Seder do we talk about Cherut? Freedom, by the way, Cherut was a political party for many years. It was the Likud was made up of Cherut. It was Menachem Begin's party. Yeah, Cherut, freedom. How many times do we discuss this? So Yetziat Mitzrayim is about Cherut. Now, they were discussing Yetziat Mitzrayim, but they would almost certainly, everybody that year would have been discussing the Cherut of themselves, the same way as we will be discussing this year our freedom. Please God, we'll be giving thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for complete freedom. Have we any idea of the miracles that are going on a minute by minute basis right at the moment? I think I said this on the Shiur yesterday. My son Bobby, who was in a particular base, which was doing stuff with the air defense, wrote me a text and says, "You have no idea of what is going on here. The technology that we have, with the triple lock of the Kippat Barzel, the Iron Dome, and the David's arrow, and the David's
sling,
and the arrow, and the bag,
iron beam,
and all these iron beam, and all these things." He said, "You've no idea."
Yeah.
And the people that are running these things, we are living through unbelievable, miraculous times, and I've no doubt that Rabbi Akiva and his compatriots were saying the same thing. They were in a much more desperate situation than we are, perhaps, because their temple had been destroyed, and they were in a very poor situation. But they will have been discussing what they were discussing there, and the idea of the word mesaprim. Okay, mesaprim. I wanted to just talk about that word for a moment. Is to tell the story, but it's not just telling a story, is it? It's engaging in debate, it's teaching, it's interpretation. I mean, I'm sure you've all done this in your Sidorim over the years, especially when you had kids who were in yeshiva or in Jewish schools. They'd come back with a pile of Divrei Torah, and you've got to get through them all. Everyone wants to say their bit. Right? It's an interpretation. Everyone's got an interpretation of this and an interpretation of that. That's what Mesaprim means. These rabbis were delving deep into into the situation. This was not just polite conversation about the Exodus, but the Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, is the prototype of liberation. So they will have been discussing how to bring about their own Yetziat Mitzrayim at this very time. And so I'd like to suggest that they were discussing their politics at this time, and ad shaba'u talmidehem, until their students. Now, it's possible and even likely, Frank, that not all the students were guarding. There would have been a rota. right? There had been a Shmirah rota. So some of the students may well have been there in the discussion and joining in. But for sure, there was at least a rota of guards outside. And it was those students that came and said, it's time to say Shema, right? Now, they would not have done so unless that it was something very, very important, because they would not have dared to interrupt their rabbis in this very important mitzvah of telling about Yetziat Mitzrayim and this very important discussion about current affairs. So, because you can say Kriyat Shema right till, a third of the day. So what they were saying was, perhaps there's a subtext here, right? What does when Kriyat Shema is, you're allowed to say Kriyat Shema, what time of the day? In sort of metaphorical terms, what is dawn? Rebirth of the day. Dawn is redemption, right? The dawn of redemption, right? Redemption comes. Dawn is the beginning of redemption. So perhaps the students were hinting here that what the rabbis were doing is going to bring about the dawn of redemption. And although the text doesn't say explicitly that the students were lookouts or guards, the context is clear. This was a time when Torah was forbidden, Torah study was forbidden. Gathering of the leaders would have been seen as subversive. They would have been under surveillance. And once it's dawn, once the light comes, they're in danger. It's no longer safe to remain together. So I think that the Haggadah's language deliberately preserves this ambiguity for us, because the idea of the Haggadah is that it's all things to all people. Right? Now, those of you who have been blessed with children or grandchildren will know that a Leila Seder with young children is very different to a Leila Seder with teenage children, and very different again when you are only adults, if there are no children there. Remember the Seder that we had during COVID when we were on our own? That was a horrible experience.
That was horrible.
Yeah.
That was the worst.
In some ways it was horrible, but in some ways,
well, you were with your family. I was with nobody. I was
we were on our own. I was
That
with my
was
wife.
horrible.
That's true. I wasn't entirely on my own, but we didn't have our children. First time we'd never have a child. I'm sure you were all in the same boat. There was something different about it, and the point I'm making is that the language of the Haggadah, the language of particularly of this story. And I'd like to suggest all of it, and we're not going to have time because we've only got another couple of weeks. How many more Mondays have we got before? Two after this one. So we'll take another two bits of the Haggadah, hopefully, and do the same sort of process as we've done tonight. But I'd like to suggest to you that the Haggadah is all things to all people. When you've got little children, when you've got little grandchildren, it's very different. You play the game of reenacting Yetziat Mitzrayim, and after all, it's for the Haggadah Televincha. That is the main thing. When you've got teenage children and they're all coming back with their books full of Divrei Torah, that's a different experience again. And when you're all adults, and when we're in a situation like we are this year, where things are uncertain, then Leila Seder becomes different again. And that's the beauty of what we are doing here. We are, and this is something which comes back to me in so many different ways. My absolute 100% favorite book of all time, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks' A Letter in a Scroll, which I quote over and over again. The idea being that we are a link in a chain, a letter in a scroll, a chapter in a book, and each family has their own chapter. And each Leila Seder is what you pass on to your children. You are making memories. When you do your Leila Seder, you are making memories for your children. And there is nothing more satisfying than when your adult children around the Seder table says, "Hey, Dad, do you remember when such and such a thing happened during the Seder. You've all had it. I'm sure you've all had that experience. What a beautiful experience that is. You know then at that point that you've done a good job because you've made that memory for them. You have done the mitzvah of the Haggaddah Levinecha. And then it's their job, the next letter in the scroll, the next chapter in the book, it's their job to do it for their children. And they, please God, when they're older, will have their satisfaction that their adult children will do the same thing. And that is how Leila Seder has survived through centuries. Lionel, you have to go. Through all the centuries, Leila Seder remains the mitzvah, almost probably more than anything else that Jewish people do. It's what kept the glue. It's part of the glue that's kept us together. And that is, not only is it the glue that's kept us together, we have kept the Seder night going for those reasons. So if you'd just like to finish today, just a few sort of comments about today on the Bnei Brak story. Memory is resistance, okay? Just as the rabbis reclaimed Yetziat Mitzrayim for them in a time of danger, we also now have to reaffirm our core values. We have to reaffirm that Shema Yisrael. We have to know when it's time to say Shema Yisrael. Hazman Higia. The time is now for us to say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. We reaffirm our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We reaffirm our trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the miracles that we are seeing on a daily basis. And we also have to say that, we also have to be vigilant. We have to be careful. Where were these rabbis? They were being very careful. They were underground. And so it means that if in the middle of the Seder, the stupid alarm goes off you go into your bunkers, right? Don't be brave and say, no, Leila Seder. There's a concept, shiluchei mitzvah einon nizakin. Those who are doing a mitzvah will not be damaged. It's not true. Don't believe it. If the alarm goes off, you go into your bunker, right? Just pretend you're Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Tarfon. Or if you think you're young at heart, pretend you're Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and you're only 18, even if you look 70, right? So go into your bunker. If you have to. That's another message that we read from this. And just to finish off, that the position in the Haggadah of this story is absolutely central. It's central to the story. It's immediately after Avadim Hayinu. It's the most important thing. Why is it there? Why is it so central? Because it's teaching us the contemporary value and the contemporary nature of the very Seder itself. On Pesach, we say, this is the bread of affliction, this is the law of freedom, and this is the night that we were redeemed, and we say, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. They were saying, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, in a time when Yerushalayim had been destroyed. So they really felt L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. Our job is to feel it and to recognize the Yad Hashem in everything that we see and to reenact not only Yetziat Mitzrayim, but to reenact Rabbi Akiva and his gang in Bnei Brak in the way that we perform our Seder, the way that we perform our Shema Yisrael, and the way that we go about our business in a holy way, the way they did. So I think that we'll leave it there. We've done just about an hour. Any questions, first of all, in the room? Frank?
Can we actually date the Seder and all the things that we're saying when that first came into them?
Okay, Frank?
Can we date what we've been learning this evening as to how much later?
Yeah, okay. Frank says, how much later did this get inserted into the Haggadah? Well, the Haggadah is a difficult thing to date altogether because it evolved over centuries. What we do know is that there were certainly elements of the Seder that we do at the time of the Mishnah, because the Mishnah in Pesachim tells us about the 4 questions and how you did it with the Korban Pesach, etc. when this story was introduced, we don't really know, because our earliest Haggadah that we've actually got, the earliest Haggadah, I think, from the Cairo Geniza, is about the 9th century CE. And so, for sure, there are earlier ones, but we don't know what they were. I suspect
this was appearing in the 9th century.
Yeah. I would suspect that this was much earlier than that. I would suspect that this was introduced into the liturgy, if you like, pretty contemporaneously. I would like to think so, because why wouldn't it? We know the story. The story's there, unless somebody's made it up, which it's possible, but I don't think so. Okay. Any questions on Zoom?
I have a personal question. Did you say Kaddish for my father? I sent you a message.
I didn't get the message. Let me just finish the recording and then we can talk about it. Any questions?
Wait. Before you do that, my father's yurtzeit was on Pesach, and there was not like a minyan. We called our minyan with children and women. Can you possibly say it like a week later? Can you say it now while you have a minyan?
Yes, we can. We don't have a minyan in the room though.
Oh,
so
it doesn't count on Zoom. Doesn't count together with Zoom.
We don't have a minyan, so we can't say Kaddish.
Okay, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, we'll talk about it. We'll find another time. Any questions on the Shiur, Jeff?
Jeff, yeah, I've got a source for the fact that this may not have happened in Bnei Brak.
Go on.
I have a Haggaddah here. It's the Gedoli Yisrael Haggaddah. It's the art scroll.
Well, there you go. Go on.
And it's saying that the Maharitz Chayis, I don't know who that is, but sounds important, raises the difficult question involving this passage. We know Bnei Brak was not within walking distance of Lod, where Rabbi Eliezer's home was. The Gemara in Sukkah tells us that Rabbi Eliezer made it a point never to leave his home during the festivals. If so, how could he have spent Pesach in Bnei Brak? The Sfas Emes proposes a resolution to this question. He says that perhaps the incident described did not take place on Pesach at all.
Oh, that was what Lionel said.
Some other night during the year, when the sages convened and continued discussing Yetzias Mitzrayim until daybreak. In fact, Ramban says of the next passage is where Rabbi Eliezer Azariah said to them, which suggests that perhaps this was the night he had the discussion with the sages as to whether there is a mitzvah to remember Exodus during all the nights of the year. And this might well have taken place on some other night other than Pesach. So there's definitely some other viewpoint.
Okay, there's a support for what Lionel said. I don't like, personally, I don't know what anybody else thinks, I don't like it at all. It's in the Haggadah, it's talking about Kol Oto Halayla, that particular night. They're talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim, they're doing Mesubin, I'll tell you in a sec. They're doing Mesubin, it makes no sense to me. Rabbi Eliezer on that particular year was in Bnei Brak, that's all. That particular year he went to Bnei Brak, he wasn't in Lod.
On Zoom.
He was on Zoom, yeah. I mean, yeah, okay, listen, I accept what you say, Jeff, but I don't have to like it. Very good. Okay.
What I said, it's what the Maharitz Chayis said.
Okay, so I'll just repeat it for those who are in the room. Jeff said, quoting the Maharitz Chai and the Sfat Emes, that it didn't happen on Seder night because Rabbi Eliezer never left Lod on the Yom Tov and was always in Lod, and Lod isn't in walking distance to Bnei Brak, so it couldn't have been on Pesach, and therefore it was on a different night, and it was probably the night that Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah said the next paragraph. But I don't know what you're going to do with Mesubin Kol Halayla. Okay, if that's, you pays your money, you takes your choice. I don't like it.
I've also got something here that says the asking of the questions is an ancient custom, and we know that it was already a practice at the time of the Second Temple.
That's Manishtana we're talking about.
Yeah. So, but this comes straight after.
It does, yeah. We're gonna. I think we'll do Manishtana next week. What do you think, guys?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll do Manishtana next week.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do Manishtana next week. Okay, Laila Tov, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.